Lowri Denman sat in a Cardiff clinic and watched a screen light up with 38 fluid-filled cysts scattered across her brain. The organism inside those cysts had a name: Taenia solium, the pork tapeworm. The same worm that, 1 year before that scan, had slid out of her intestine in a restaurant bathroom, a full meter of segmented living ribbon. Her name is Lowri Denman. The place was India, the year 2007, and the food she later blamed was not meat. She had been strictly vegetarian for the entire trip. She was 42, a media professional from Wales, and she believed she had done everything right. No street meat, no tap water she could see, no obvious mistakes. 38 parasites in her brain said otherwise. What you are about to discover has nothing to do with hygiene habits or eating pork. It has everything to do with something far harder to control, and it starts with the question no doctor thought to ask her when she first came home. 3 years before the toilet in that restaurant, Lowri Denman was 39 years old, a media professional, Welsh, articulate, careful with money and careful with her body. She had traveled before, Europe, North Africa, a stretch through Southeast Asia in her early 30s, and she thought of herself as the kind of traveler who reads the guidebook twice and then reads the footnotes. India had been on her list for a decade. 3 months. That was the plan. Delhi, then south, then a slow drift back up through the interior. She packed rehydration sachets, anti-malarials, a water filter she had bought online after reading reviews for a week. And she made one decision, before the plane even left, that she would repeat later to every friend, every doctor, every reporter who asked. She would eat vegetarian the entire trip. No meat, no fish, no street kebabs, no mystery curries with unidentified cubes floating in oil. Because meat, she believed, was where the danger lived. Picture that decision. Imagine you are her, standing in a small hotel room in Delhi on the second night, unwrapping a paper cone of pani puri from a stall the receptionist swore by. The tamarind water inside is dark and cold and sweet. You know the rule about ice, so you avoid the ice. You know the rule about salads, so you avoid the salads. You do not know the rule about the water the vendor used to soak the mint that morning, because nobody ever told you that rule existed. She ate the pani puri. She ate the chaat. She drank lasses from bottled milk and coffee from boiled kettles. She washed her hands before every meal with soap she had brought from Cardiff. According to accounts she gave years later, she remembers thinking she was being almost annoyingly cautious. Her travel companion, a friend from work, was less strict. He ate lamb kebabs in Jaipur. He drank a mango juice in Varanasi that Lowri refused. Remember that friend. He is going to matter at the end. Have you ever done that thing where you convince yourself a rule protects you from a danger it was never designed to touch? That is what she did. Vegetarianism protects against undercooked pork. It does nothing at all against the microscopic egg of a tapeworm floating in tap water used to rinse a coriander leaf. The 3 months passed. She saw the Taj at dawn. She walked barefoot on the Ghats in Varanasi. She got mild traveler's diarrhea twice, took the pills, moved on. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that felt like a warning. She flew home from Delhi with 240 photographs on a memory card and a small brass elephant in her carry-on. She hugged her mother at Cardiff Airport. She went back to work the following Monday. For 3 years, nothing happened. No headaches, no fevers, no twitches. She got a promotion, she moved flats, she dated somebody, broke up with somebody, adopted a cat. In her body, in a quiet part of her small intestine, an adult tapeworm was slowly growing to just over 3 feet in length, shedding thousands of egg-packed segments into her stool every week without her ever noticing. And somewhere in the wall of that same intestine, at the very beginning, a smaller number of eggs had done something different. They had hatched. They had drilled through the intestinal lining. They had entered her bloodstream and gone looking for a place to hide. They found 38 of those places. All of them were inside her skull. She did not know any of this. Nobody did. She was 39, then 40, then 41. And she was, by every measure she could see, completely well. Sit with that for a second. 3 years of feeling healthy. 3 years of parasites building homes in your brain while you post holiday photos to Facebook. For the next 3 years, nothing happened. Then the worm came out. And the doctor she saw did not see it. 2010, a restaurant in central Cardiff, a Tuesday, mid-afternoon. Lowri had eaten a light lunch and gone to use the bathroom before heading back to the office. What happened in that cubicle she has described, in interviews since, as the single most surreal moment of her life. She looked down and saw, coiled in the water, something that was not part of her. It was pale, it was flat, it was segmented. And when she straightened it out later on a piece of paper towel, before she could think clearly enough to stop herself, it was just over a meter long. She did not scream. She did not faint. She wrapped it, according to accounts she gave later, in a plastic bag she found in her handbag, and she walked to her general practitioner that same afternoon. Day 1 of the medical timeline. The GP looked at the bag. The GP, by all available accounts, had never seen an adult tapeworm outside of a textbook illustration. She was told it was almost certainly a Taenia species. She was told to provide a stool sample. She was told, above all, not to worry. Adult tapeworms, the doctor explained, live in the gut. They cause weight loss, mild discomfort, sometimes nothing at all. A course of medication would clear it. Simple. The discharge note said the patient was reassured and referred for stool ova and parasite testing. What the discharge note did not say was that the doctor should have asked one question: where did you travel and when? Because the answer to that question would have set off every alarm in a tropical medicine textbook. Day 14. The stool test came back. Negative. No eggs, no proglottids, no fragments, nothing. The lab could not confirm the species. The GP told her the worm was probably a one-off, an isolated adult that had already been expelled whole. The infection, they said, was over. Everyone assumed the story ended there. That is not what happened. The story had barely started, because the adult worm in her gut had never been the real problem. The real problem was upstairs, and it had been growing for 3 years. Weeks later, then months. Lowri began to notice small things. A headache behind her right eye that arrived in the afternoons. A strange feeling of pressure when she leaned forward to tie her shoes. She saw a different GP. She was told it was probably eye strain from too much screen time. Try reading glasses. Try more sleep. Try less coffee. The prescription was ibuprofen. At the moment the doctor wrote it, 38 larval cysts were sitting in her cerebral cortex, each one a tiny fluid balloon pressing very gently on the tissue around it. The ibuprofen did nothing, because there was nothing an anti-inflammatory could do about parasites. Have you ever had a doctor tell you it is stress? Have you ever walked out of a surgery feeling smaller than when you walked in? Maybe you too have carried a symptom that a professional dismissed, and maybe you too went home and tried to believe them, because the alternative was too big to hold. She tried. For months she tried. And then, on a morning she has described later as ordinary in every other way, her right arm went numb while she was making coffee. Then her vision blurred. Then the kitchen floor came up to meet her. The ambulance took 11 minutes. In the emergency department, the physician on duty that night was different from every doctor she had seen before. She was a registrar who had done part of her training in Mumbai. She listened to the story. She asked about the worm. She asked about the trip. She asked how long Lowri had spent in India and what she had eaten and whether she had ever, at any point, drunk anything that was not from a sealed bottle. Then she ordered the MRI. And she asked one question nobody else had asked. The question was simple. Have you ever at any point been told your stool test might have missed something? Lowri said yes. The registrar nodded once and picked up the phone. The MRI happened that night. The images came back within the hour. And on the screen in the small dark reading room of a Cardiff hospital, the radiologist counted them out loud. 1, 2, 3. Then he stopped counting individually and started grouping them by lobe: frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital. When he finished, the number he wrote in the report was 38. 38 fluid-filled cysts scattered through the brain of a 42-year-old woman who had believed, until that afternoon, that her worst medical problem was tension headaches. The diagnosis was neurocysticercosis. Say it slowly. Neuro, from the Greek neuron, meaning nerve. Cysticercus, from the Latin, meaning the bladder-like larval stage of a tapeworm. And the suffix osis, meaning a diseased condition of, in plain English, a disease in which the immature form of the pork tapeworm has built fluid-filled bubbles inside the tissue of the central nervous system. Think of each cyst as a water balloon the size of a lentil, filled with clear liquid and a single coiled larva at the center. Now imagine 38 of those, distributed through the folds of a living brain, like beads of gel pushed into a sponge. Now here comes the first of the things promised at the start. Lowri had not been infected by eating pork. She had been infected by swallowing microscopic eggs of the pork tapeworm, eggs that came from another human being's feces, somewhere upstream in the water or food chain during her trip. This is the second infection pathway of Taenia solium, and it is the one almost nobody warns travelers about 4 terms. First, taeniasis, from the Greek taenia, meaning a ribbon. It is the infection of the human gut by the adult worm. A long, flat ribbon unspooling from the small intestine, anchored by a tiny hooked head, growing new segments every day. The visible consequence in Lowri's case was the meter-long worm in the Cardiff toilet in 2010. Second, cysticercosis. Same worm, different life stage. Instead of the adult ribbon living in the gut, a microscopic egg hatches in the intestine, releases a 6-hooked embryo called an oncosphere, and that embryo drills through the gut wall into a blood vessel. From there, it rides the bloodstream, getting off wherever conditions are favorable: muscle, eye, brain. Once it arrives, it stops moving, curls up, grows a protective shell, and becomes a cyst. A squatter who breaks into a house, locks the door from the inside, and settles in for years without paying rent. Third, the life cycle itself. A human with an adult tapeworm passes eggs in their feces. Those eggs contaminate water, vegetables, or the hands of a food vendor who did not wash after using the toilet. Another human swallows the eggs. In the pig, larvae insist in muscle, and if that muscle is eaten raw or undercooked, the cycle completes as taeniasis. But if a human swallows the eggs directly, they skip the pig entirely and become the intermediate host themselves. The postal system analogy holds. The letter is supposed to travel from one host to a pig to another human, but sometimes it arrives at the wrong address. Lowri was the wrong address. Fourth, autoinfection. Because Lowri had carried an adult worm for 3 years, shedding eggs daily, there is a documented pathway called external autoinfection in which a carrier can reinfect themselves through their own hand-to-mouth contact. Some researchers believe this mechanism explains how a single traveler ends up with dozens of cysts rather than 1 or 2. The visible consequence on the scan was 38. In the general population of the United Kingdom, diagnosed neurocysticercosis runs at fewer than 10 cases per year. In parts of northern India, Bihar, Orissa, Uttar Pradesh, prevalence among adult neurological patients has been reported at up to 2.5%. In a 2023 review published in the World Health Organization Bulletin on Neglected Tropical Diseases, Taenia solium ranked first among the 24 foodborne parasites of global concern, responsible for an estimated 2.5 to 8.3 million cases of neurocysticercosis worldwide. The statistic that stops the room: 95% of documented Indian cases of cysticercosis occur in vegetarians. Lowri had not been an exception to the pattern. She had been the pattern. The registrar in the Cardiff emergency room did not tell Lowri the diagnosis that night. She said they needed a specialist in tropical neurology. She said the cysts had been there for years and would not, in the next 24 hours, do anything sudden. What she did not say was that the standard first-line treatment, a drug called albendazole, works by killing the larvae inside the cysts, and that killing 38 larvae simultaneously inside a living human brain can trigger an inflammatory response violent enough to cause fatal cerebral edema. The neurologist consulted, then returned to the room where Lowri and her mother were waiting. "It is not a tumor," he said. "They are parasites, and there are 38 of them." Not the silence of shock, the silence of a person recalibrating everything she thought she knew about the last 3 years of her own body. The treatment plan was albendazole combined with high-dose corticosteroids to suppress the inflammatory response alongside lifelong antiepileptic medication to prevent seizures. The published survival rate for treated massive neurocysticercosis in cases of 30 or more cysts sat at around 85%. The family had 48 hours to consent, and what nobody in that room had yet told Lowri was that one of her 38 cysts had already begun to die on its own, and that the swelling it was generating had started pressing against something the neurologist had not yet found a way to mention. The treatment began in a Welsh hospital under the direct supervision of a specialist team who, by their own quiet admission to colleagues later, had never personally managed a burden this large. Albendazole dexamethasone, an antiepileptic drug to catch the seizures they knew were coming. Then, the wait. Here is what would have happened if the diagnosis had come 6 months later. Step 1. The larvae, aging inside their cysts, would have begun to die on their own schedule. Step 2. Each dying larva would have leaked antigenic protein into the surrounding brain tissue, and the immune system, having been ignoring the cysts for years, would have finally noticed them all at once. Step 3. Massive inflammation. Step 4. Rising intracranial pressure. Step 5. Seizures that would not stop. Step 6. Herniation of the brainstem through the base of the skull. Step 7. Death. The 48 hours the family had used to consent had, in medical terms, been the difference between a treatable disease and a fatal one. The first week of albendazole was, by all accounts, brutal. Lowri developed the seizures the team had been warned about. She spent time in a monitored bed with anti-seizure medication running continuously. Her mother slept in the chair beside her. Her friend from the India trip, the one who had eaten the lamb kebabs, the one who had drunk the mango juice she had refused, flew in from London and sat with her for 3 days. He, by every scan performed on him afterward, had never been infected. Same country, same trip, same 3 months, different outcome. Then the apparent recovery. After 10 days, the seizures stopped. She was discharged home with medication. She went back to work part-time. She told friends she was through the worst of it. 3 weeks later, the follow-up MRI showed something the team had feared. Several of the cysts had swollen rather than shrunk. The inflammatory phase was ongoing. She was readmitted, a second course of steroids, a slower taper. And then, over months, the images began to change. The cysts stopped swelling. They began to calcify. On the scans, the fluid-filled bubbles became small white points, like specks of chalk pressed into the tissue. The parasites inside were dying, walling themselves off, becoming inert. By 2017, Lowri had her last seizure. By 2022, she was back at full-time work. Today she lives in Cardiff, still on antiepileptic medication, still with 38 calcified points in her brain, still, by her own description, grateful. She does not regret the trip. Her friend from London still eats lamb kebabs. He has never had a headache he thought twice about, and Lowri is not alone. The World Health Organization estimates between 2.5 and 8.3 million people worldwide are currently living with neurocysticercosis. In endemic regions, it is the single largest preventable cause of adult-onset epilepsy. In non-endemic countries like the United Kingdom, fewer than 10 travelers are diagnosed each year, and the difference between a 6-week diagnosis and a 6-year one is, in this disease, the difference between a full recovery and a lifetime of anticonvulsants. To put that in sharper relief, India alone carries a pooled prevalence of 5.2% for Taenia solium infection, and 95% of documented cases in that country occur in vegetarians, people who made exactly the same calculation Lowri Denman made, and who were defeated by the same contaminated glass of water. Here is the rule. If you have spent more than 2 weeks in a region where Taenia solium is endemic, parts of India, Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and you develop new-onset headaches, seizures, or unexplained neurological symptoms at any point in the 10 years that follow, ask specifically for a brain MRI and specifically for serological testing for cysticercosis. Do not accept stress, screen fatigue, or eye strain as an answer until those 2 tests have been done. The parasite is slow and patient and entirely indifferent to the dietary choices of its host, and the window between treatable and permanent closes without ceremony. In the first scene of this story, a woman in Cardiff sat down to lunch and stood up carrying a meter of tape in a plastic bag. She had gone to India believing that avoiding meat would keep her safe. She had come home with 38 passengers in her head who had traveled in through a glass of water and a rinsed leaf of coriander. The body does not warn you. It only keeps score. The most dangerous meal of her life was the one she chose because it felt safe. This is Shocking Medical Cases.